The village of Kaloji lay nestled between rolling hills and vast golden plains. The people lived simply, tending to their cattle, harvesting millet, and telling tales around a fire under the vast African sky. Yet, for all its tranquility, the village bore whispers of an unsettling mystery, one that revolved around a man named Makalo. Makalo was no ordinary man. From the moment of his birth, the village elders spoke of his unusual nature. His mother, a woman of deep wisdom and unwavering faith, had endured a troubled pregnancy, plagued by strange dreams and omens of serpents coiling around her belly. When Makalo was born, the midwives gasped and exchanged furtive glances, for the child bore a secret that only a few would ever come to understand. As Makalo grew, he was unlike the other boys. He was strong, intelligent, and handsome, with skin as dark as the richest soil and eyes that gleamed like polished onyx. Women admired him from a distance, yet he never courted any of them. The whispers followed him wherever he went, and despite his charm, something about him kept the villagers wary. The truth was known only to the elders and the healers. Makalo carried a curse that made him different from all men. His manhood, though a symbol of strength and virility in their culture, was far beyond normal. It was oversized to the point that no woman could receive him. Many in the village speculated, but no one dared speak the truth aloud. When Makalo reached the age of marriage, his family arranged for him to wed Nia, a beautiful and kind-hearted woman from a neighboring village. On their wedding night, beneath the thatched roof of their hut, Makalo's deepest fears were realized. He could not consummate the marriage. Nia, despite her devotion, wept in pain, and shame filled Makalo's heart. The next day, she left in silence, unwilling to face the stigma of a husband she could never truly be with. Makalo's reputation spread quickly. Women avoided his gaze, mothers warned their daughters, and the village children whispered cruel jokes behind his back. He became a ghost in his own home, a man feared not for his strength, but for his curse. Desperate for answers, Makalo sought the guidance of Mzee Kalundu, the village elder known for his wisdom in matters of the unseen. The old man sat before a fire, his wrinkled hands tracing patterns in the dust as he listened to Makalo's woes. "This is no ordinary affliction, my son," Kalunda said, his voice heavy with the weight of forgotten knowledge. "Your burden is tied to the ancestors, to forces beyond this world. To break this curse, you must seek the River Mother." The River Mother was a spirit known in legend, said to dwell in the sacred waters of the Kumbla River. She was neither benevolent nor cruel, but a force of nature, granting boons to those she deemed worthy and punishing those who came with impure hearts. Makalo's journey would be treacherous. The river was deep within the wild lands, past the territories of rival tribes and beasts that lurked in the shadows. But he had no choice. To live with his curse was to live without purpose. With resolve hardening in his chest, he gathered his spear and provisions, bidding farewell to the only home he had ever known. As he set forth into the wilderness, the village watched in silence. Some pitied him, others were glad to see him go. But none knew whether Makalo would ever return, or if he would find the answers he so desperately sought. Makalo ventured deep into the untamed wilderness, where the land itself seemed to test his resolve. The first night, he camped beneath an ancient baobab tree, its gnarled roots twisting like the fingers of an elder reaching for the earth. The sounds of the night were unfamiliar, and foreboding hyenas cackled in the distance, and unseen creatures rustled in the underbrush. The journey was grueling. The sun scorched the land by day, forcing him to ration his water carefully. At night, the cold bit through his skin, reminding him that the wild had no mercy. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but he pressed on, guided by the knowledge that the River Mother was his only hope. The encounter with the Mzuka. On the third day, he encountered the first true test of his journey. As he approached a watering hole, desperate to refill his supply, he sensed another presence. A group of men, their faces painted with the markings of the Mzuka tribe, stood on the opposite bank. Their leader, a towering warrior with scars carved into his arms like a tapestry of battles, stepped forward. "You walk in our land, stranger," the warrior declared. "What do you seek?" Makalo knew of the Mzuka. They were fierce and untrusting of outsiders. "I seek the River Mother," he answered truthfully. The warriors exchanged glances before breaking into laughter. "Many have sought her," the leader scoffed. "Few have returned. Why should we let you pass?" Makalo stood tall, meeting the warrior's gaze without flinching. "Because I have no choice. My fate depends on it." The leader studied him for a moment before nodding. "Then prove yourself. Survive the trial of the three beasts, and we will let you continue." Makalo had no time to question the challenge before he was led into a makeshift arena, a sun-baked clearing surrounded by warriors. The first trial, the hyena. The first beast was released, a massive hyena, its eyes gleaming with hunger. It lunged at him, jaws snapping. Makalo dodged and drove his spear forward, striking its shoulder. The beast yelped but did not falter. He had to outthink it. Watching its movements, he baited it into lunging once more, then sidestepped and drove his blade into its exposed throat. The warriors cheered. The second trial, the python. Next came a great python, its body thick as a man's thigh. It slithered toward him, coiling with lethal intent. Makalo knew he couldn't overpower it, so he let it strike first. As it wrapped around his arm, he grabbed its head with his free hand and squeezed with all his might. The serpent writhed, but eventually it went limp. He dropped it to the ground, panting. The final trial, the warrior's duel. The final test was unlike the others. A man was brought forward, a Mzuka warrior with a scarred face. "Defeat him and you may go," the leader declared. Makalo hesitated. He had no desire to fight a man without cause, but as the warrior lunged, he had no choice but to defend himself. They clashed, exchanging blows that echoed through the clearing. Makalo fought with precision of a hunter, dodging strikes and countering with measured force. The battle was fierce, but in the end he stood victorious. The leader nodded in approval. "You have earned your passage, warrior Kaloji. May the River Mother grant you what you seek." The journey continues. Makalo, bruised but unbroken, continued his journey. The wilderness was unrelenting. Days blurred into nights as he walked, his muscles aching, his mind weary but determined. The stories of the River Mother whispered in his thoughts. Some spoke of her as a benevolent goddess who could grant miracles. Others claimed she was a trickster, demanding impossible sacrifices. He had no way of knowing which was true. One evening, as he trudged through thick reeds near the river, a sound stopped him in his tracks. A soft, melodic voice drifted through the trees, weaving through the air like mist. It was a woman's song, haunting, beautiful, and unlike anything he had ever heard. Makalo followed the sound, his heart pounding. He pushed through the dense vegetation and found himself at the edge of a clearing where a small pool shimmered under the moonlight. Standing at its center was a figure, half submerged in the water. Her dark skin glowed with an unnatural light, and her hair floated around her like the tendrils of a living shadow. "You seek me," the figure said, her voice smooth as the river surface. "But do you know what you ask?" Makalo fell to his knees. "I seek to be freed from my curse." The river mother smiled, but it was not a smile of kindness. "Every gift has a price," she murmured. "Are you willing to pay it?" Makalo hesitated. He had come so far, risked so much. But what price would she demand? And would he be willing to give it? Makalo knelt before the shimmering figure in the water, his breath shallow, his body aching from the trials he had endured. The river mother's presence was unlike anything he had ever encountered, both mesmerizing and unnerving. Her glowing eyes held secrets older than the land itself, and her voice carried the weight of untold stories. "You seek freedom from your curse," she repeated, the water rippling around her. "But you do not yet understand its true nature." Makalo clenched his fists. "I was born with this affliction. It has brought me nothing but suffering. I have been cast out, ridiculed, and forced to walk this path alone." The river mother tilted her head, her lips curving into a knowing smile. "And yet you survived. You overcame beasts, warriors, and the wilderness itself. Tell me, child of Kaloji, do you believe strength is measured by comfort or by adversity?" Makalo hesitated. He had never considered his suffering in that way. His entire life, he had sought to rid himself of this burden, never once questioning whether it had shaped him into something more. "But this is not the life I chose," he murmured. "Few choose their fates," the river mother replied, "but all must decide what to do with them." The bargain. She extended her hand, palm up. A small whirlpool formed in the water, swirling faster and faster until it solidified into a crystal-clear droplet. It hovered above her fingers, pulsating with an inner light. "I can grant your wish," she said. "I can reshape your form, remove what you call a curse, and give you the life you desire. But my gifts do not come freely." Makalo swallowed hard. "What is the price?" The river mother's eyes darkened. "You must give up the one thing that makes you truly you." A chill ran down his spine. "And what is that?" She reached out and pressed a single finger to his forehead. Visions flooded his mind, his mother's gentle touch, his father's proud smile, the laughter of his village before they turned against him. Then came the memories of his trials, the pain, the hunger, the battles he fought to get here. And beneath it all, a fire, an unyielding will to survive. "Your spirit," she whispered, "your resilience. If I remove your burden, I take with the fire that has carried you this far." Makalo gasped, stumbling back. "You would take my strength?" The river mother nodded. "You would be ordinary, no greater than any other man. No trials, no suffering, but also no greatness." He looked at his reflection in the water, his mind churning. Was this what he truly wanted? A simple life, free of hardship but also free of purpose? The test of wisdom. Before he could answer, the water around him began to shift. The river mother raised her arms, and the pool expanded into a vast lake, its surface turning to liquid glass. Scenes played out upon it like the stories of old. He saw himself returning to Kaloji, his body changed. The villagers welcomed him with open arms, no longer afraid. He saw himself taking a wife, raising children, living a peaceful, uneventful life. But there was something hollow in his gaze and absence of the fire that once burned within him. Then the vision shifted. He saw another path, one where he embraced his burden, where he became more than his affliction. He saw himself standing tall among warriors, leading those who had been cast out like him. He saw people looking up to him not in fear, but in awe. Makalow's heart pounded. The choice was clear. The decision. He turned to the River Mother, his resolve unwavering. I will not trade my spirit for comfort. If my burden is part of me, then I will learn to wield it, not hide from it. The River Mother smiled. Truly this time. Then you have passed my final test. With a wave of her hand, the visions faded, and the water returned to its natural state. She stepped forward, placing her hand over Makalow's chest. A warmth spread through him, not the burning heat of the sun, nor the fever of battle, but a deep, steady warmth, like the earth itself acknowledging him. I cannot take your burden, she said, but I can help you understand it. You are not cursed, Makalow. You are chosen. With that, the River Mother dissolved into mist, her form fading into the night air. The water stilled, leaving only the echo of her words. Makalow stood there for a long time, the weight of his journey settling upon him. When he finally turned away from the river, he was no longer the outcast seeking a cure. He was a man with a purpose. The journey back to Kaloji was not an easy one. Makalow had left his village as an outcast, a man cursed by fate. Now, he returned as something else entirely, a man who had faced his greatest fears and emerged not as a victim, but as a warrior of destiny. The River Mother's words echoed in his mind. You are not cursed, Makalow. You are chosen. The return to Kaloji. As he approached the outskirts of the village, the once familiar landscape felt different. The towering baobab trees, the rustling golden fields, the distant laughter of children, all of it was unchanged. Yet he felt like a stranger walking into a life that no longer belonged to him. The first to see him was a young boy herding goats. His eyes widened in recognition, then in fear. He dropped his staff and sprinted toward the village, screaming, Makalow has returned! Makalow has returned! The village erupted in murmurs. The last time they had seen Makalow, he was a man burdened by a deformity they feared and rejected. Now he walked with an air of quiet confidence, his posture unyielding, his eyes holding a wisdom that no ordinary man possessed. A village divided. The elders gathered in the village square, uncertain how to receive him. Some saw him as a threat, a reminder of the supernatural forces they did not understand. Others saw him as a man who had endured trials beyond their imagination and returned with knowledge that could not be ignored. His father, Chiefendale, stepped forward. The once proud leader looked into his son's eyes, searching for answers. Makalow, he said at last, his voice heavy with emotion, why have you returned? Makalow took a deep breath. I left as a man seeking escape from his burden. I return as a man who has embraced it. Whispers spread through the crowd. His mother, tears in her eyes, stepped forward and touched his face. My son, she whispered, you are different. Makalow nodded, because I now understand. My path is not to hide from what I am, but to use it. The challenge, but not all welcomed his return. From a crowd stepped Jingo, the village's strongest warrior. the man who had once humiliated Makalo before all of Kaloji. You speak of wisdom and fate, Django sneered. But we only see a man who fled and now returns with riddles. If you are truly changed, prove it. The villagers murmured in agreement. Words alone would not be enough to convince them. They needed to see. Django stepped into the center of the square, slamming his spear into the ground. Face me, he challenged. If you are truly a warrior, show us. Makalo did not flinch. He had battled creatures of the wild, faced spirits of the river, and endured trials that no mortal should. This was no longer about proving his strength to others. It was about proving to himself that he was ready to lead. He nodded. Very well. The duel. The villagers formed a circle. Anticipation thick in the air. Django was a seasoned warrior, his skill unmatched in Kaloji. But Makalo was no longer the boy they had once shunned. The fight began. Django lunged forward, spear aimed at Makalo's chest. But Makalo moved with the grace of a man who had learned from the elements themselves. He sidestepped effortlessly, his reflexes honed by trials far beyond mere combat. Django struck again, this time with a flurry of attacks meant to overwhelm. But Makalo remained calm, his movement precise, his breathing steady. He saw the weaknesses in Django's form, the gaps in his strikes. And when the moment was right, he struck. With a single, well-placed maneuver, he disarmed Django, sending the warrior's spear clattering to the ground. Before Django could react, Makalo pressed a firm hand against his chest, pushing him back. It was not an attack meant to harm, it was a statement. The village fell silent. Django, breathless and stunned, looked up at Makalo with something resembling respect. He nodded slowly and stepped back, acknowledging his defeat. Makalo turned to the people of Kaloji. I do not return to claim vengeance. I return to guide. We fear what we do not understand, but I have seen the truth. Our strength is not in running from fate. It is in facing it, embracing it, and rising above it. The path forward. The elders whispered among themselves. Finally, Chief Ndale spoke. Then you shall have your place among us, Makalo, not as the outcast we once believed you to be, but as a man who has walked the path of the spirits and returned with their wisdom. A cheer erupted. The people, once divided, now saw Makalo not as cursed, but as chosen. And for the first time in his life, Makalo felt whole. The final lesson. As the celebration began, his mother took his hand and whispered, "You were never truly alone, my son. You just needed to see it for yourself." Makalo smiled, understanding at last. His journey had been one of hardship, but it had led him to something greater than he had ever imagined. He had found his place not by changing who he was, but by accepting it. And so, the legend of Makalo, the chosen of Kaloji, was born. Makalo's story is one of resilience, self-discovery, and the courage to embrace one's true path. How many of us spend our lives running from what makes us unique, fearing judgment, rejection, or failure? But the truth is, our struggles shape us, and our challenges forge us into who we are meant to be. If this story inspired you, remember, you're not defined by your obstacles, but by how you rise above them. Share this tale, reflect on your own journey, and embrace your destiny. Subscribe for more powerful stories from across the world, where legends come alive and wisdom echoes through time.